One of the most important moments in the life of a sneaker and a sneaker's technology is when the point comes when it goes from innovative to generally available. That moment marks a massive difference in what's happening with the technology and with the shoe. What was once the select few available only to the more expensive lines or the more unique and sort of rarely available stuff out there, collaborations, friends and family, that kind of stuff, is now moving into the regularly available things, coming into stuff that you'll see on high streets and in regular sneaker stores. So what was once boutique is now regularly available, and this video is all about that point at the Adidas line with the 3D printed midsoles and the 4D Futurecraft line, because this is what we're talking about today, is the point when that transition goes from being hard to get your hands on, something that's not widely available, and they start to mass produce it in many different ways so that it's more readily available to basically people like me out there. And so being able to get your hands on this technology and shoes with this technology, this is what we're talking about today, and especially about this shoe right here, which is the 4D Kick. That's what I'm hearing it called. I've seen a couple of different colorways on them, but most of the colorways that I've seen have been sort of shots on foot that people have managed to get an early release or an early pair. But what we're looking at today is actually Adidas promotional material photographs, and then we know, actually what's coming. So when it comes to the colorways and the colorways that we've seen on social media and different people's Twitter feeds and Instagrams and things like that, they're kind of projections or expectations of what is hoped for, intentions, if you like, but what actually comes through is sometimes different, and that's what we've got today, what's coming through. So it's all about this move from the kind of hard to get your hands on, very unique and innovative, and getting that move into the regularly available stuff. Now what we're going to be talking about is that 3D printed midsole, but we've been here before with Adidas. Adidas has previous in this department, and what I'm talking about is the Boost midsole technology, probably one of the biggest midsole technologies of the last 5 years, and definitely a game changer for Adidas, because pre-Boost Adidas was just sort of bubbling along, but Boost gave them that access to the crossover, to the high street appeal and to the fashion appeal, and all of a sudden what were sports only sneakers have made a transition into the fashion world, and it was the Boost midsole that had a huge part to do with that, and also the prime knit uppers, but we're not getting into that today. We're going to be sticking with the Boost material because there's a particular moment in the line of the Boost, in the history of Boost, in the timeline of Boost material, when that too actually had a sort of dip where it became more readily available, a little bit cheaper for people to get their hands on. And specifically what I want to talk about is the Solar Boost, and there'll be a picture behind me here of a Solar Boost shoe, and gradually and slowly, I'm sure I'll be zooming in on the toe box there, and what you can see is that the Boost midsole on the Solar Boost doesn't cover the entire length of the shoe. It actually sort of stops short of the toe, which is kind of the big feature and the big detail about when the technology goes from being specifically available in a small range to being more broadly available in a lot of different ways. And that Solar Boost is a great example, because you see it's not covering the full midsole like regular Ultra Boost, for example, would do, and it's making its way into other sneakers in a smaller sort of way, more easily accessible, more financially accessible to people out there. And they did it also with another shoe. Golly, I can't remember what it was called, but I remember it had a big chunk of Boost on the heel, but I think the forefoot was less Boost. I might be wrong in that. Maybe both sides of that shoe's midsole was Boost, but I don't think the front end was. I'll find a picture of it and put it up behind me. I can't remember the name of the shoe though, but it was there. Like, it had a sort of 1 year moment when they were kind of hot at the Adidas line, but then drifted away again. So hopefully that's behind me on the green screen. You can see what I mean, and hopefully it does represent that sort of half Boost technology. And then if we take that forward to today's shoe, and I love to do Futurecraft or 3D printed midsoles or 4D or whatever you want to call it at the Adidas line, because I get to talk about one of my all-time favorite shoes. No holds barred. This is absolutely in my top 5. If I could get my hands on a pair of these guys, they'd be sitting in a crystal glass showcase, and nobody would be getting their hands on them. They would just sit there, and I'd just sit and look at them because they're so beautiful. We're talking about the Daniel Arshams, one of the very first 3D print sole shoes, and it's an absolutely beautiful shoe with a monster price tag on it. I think they retailed for between $400 and $500, and that's what I mean about being inexpensive accessible to most people out there. You would not see them on the high street. That's just not going to happen, and most people would not be able to buy those shoes. It was the very first sort of generation of 3D printed midsoles. Of course, very expensive, very hard to get your hands on, very sort of rare and difficult to sort of pin down, and expensive too. But gradually over time, that that 4D Futurecraft midsole, the 3D printed midsole, has gradually gotten more and more accessible to people out there. And just this year, I think I'm right in saying, finally the 4D Futurecraft line, the 3D printed midsole, dropped below the $200 mark, putting them much more in line with what people can afford. And then this shoe today here, like I said, marks that transition into definitely generally available. And what you're looking at is exactly the same as that Solar Boost and that Ultra Boost idea, that the 3D printed midsole on these guys doesn't cover the front to back length of the shoe, but just the back portion of the shoe. And that's a step forward, even though it kind of looks like a step back. It looks like you're stripping back the shoe and reducing what's there, but it's a step forward in terms of accessibility, in terms of finances, and in terms of people being able to get their hands on a technology that was once just out of reach to most of us, and now it's within reach to most of us. So that's why I think this shoe is important. I'd actually lined up a completely different shoe for today's video, and I've already forgotten what it was going to be. It's a Kyrie 7, and I'll do that tomorrow anyway, that Kyrie 7 video. But when I saw these guys, now they're coming out on August the 12th, and I'm shooting this video on August the 5th, and it'll probably go up on August the 7th, which is only 5 days before the drop date, and that's way too close to the drop date for me, because I like to be about 10 days before the drop date. But because it's such an important shoe in the timeline of the history of the 3D printed midsole, in that 4D Futurecraft timeline, this shoe will mark the moment that their transition from being unaffordable to accessible has been complete. Like I say, the price has been dropping down to below the $200 mark, and now we're getting into a season or an era when they're not putting the full length midsole on there in the 3D printed midsole, but they're actually stripping it back to just about half of the midsole. Very important step, very important moment as far as Adidas and as far as 3D printed midsoles are going. But question, why would they do that? Is that midsole stable enough to actually have worth? And there's predominantly an athletic shoe. It's to do with sports. Very rare for Adidas to make a fashion only shoe. It's usually sports shoes, and then that shoe happens to have crossover appeal. So I'm wondering, if this is a running shoe, which I expect it to be, does it have the performance numbers that you would get with, for example, Boost or Air or something like that? Or is it just a gimmick to look good, but it doesn't actually have the durability and the performance to actually enhance your sports or your performance yourself in whatever chosen discipline that you're going for? Especially as we're right in the middle of the Olympics, I doubt if you saw anybody with half 3D printed midsoles running around the track in Tokyo, which is exactly where I am, by the way, if you didn't know that already. I'm in Tokyo, Japan, shooting this content for you guys every single day. Another little detail in the shoe, though, I mean, it's great to look at the midsole and talk about that 3D printed midsole and what that means, but of course there is a shoe itself here with some details in there that's worth looking at. And I think the most important detail that I would want to look at is go up onto the toe and see this double layered effect where you have that outside layer in mesh on black, and then below that the inside kind of almost sock layer in a neon electric yellow color. It's a great contrast, and you see that all across the shoe. Some places where it's just pop in yellow, other places where it's layered black and yellow, and other places where it's just straight up black. But it's a great combination of colors that really helps that boost come forward. Now, the shoes that I did see on social media were more olive green and more of a military green, so these are definitely not in that department. And maybe those shoes have dropped or will drop at some point in this move into more affordable 3D printed midsoles. But for what I'm seeing from the actual Adidas promotional materials, is the shoe that we've been looking at today. And it's a great looking shoe, and it could very well mark a transition for that 4D Futurecraft line. 3D printed midsoles going to be much more widely available, much more accessible to you guys out there, well within the price range of between $100 and $200, which is a great thing, finally, to be accessible. But maybe it will help pull down the price of those Daniel Arshams, and I can get my hands on a pair of those sometime soon as well. So with that being said, a little bit of an unusual video today. Usually I do a video about a shoe and take it apart bit by bit and tell you all the important details on it, but this one's more, it's more about where it fits in with the history and the timeline of the 3D printed midsole. Like I said, It's not really about this shoe specifically. It's just more about where it fits in with that gradual sort of move to more accessibly available, more financially available. So hopefully you appreciate that content. But all that's left for me to do is just to wrap this video up and remind you guys that I do this every single day. And because I do it every single day, that means that you are guaranteed to see me tomorrow.